Good morning. It's Thursday the 28th of May 2026 and welcome to this month's meeting and the first of the new civic year of Rother District Council's Planning Committee. I'd like to welcome back members from last year, and also in addition we have a new member in Councillor Andrew Mear, who has relinquished chairmanship of the council and has now become a substantive member, and Councillor Mrs Vicky Cook has become the substitute member. I'm Brian Drayson. I've been re-elected chair of the committee. The committee is required to consider the applications that are before it today against national and local planning policies. Where these policies appear to conflict with each other, the members are required to use their individual knowledge, experience and judgment to come to a decision for the benefit of the whole of Rother District. It should be noted that the Planning Committee is not a public meeting, but a meeting that the public may attend. Rother District Council has a public speaking scheme which allows members of the public and others to address the committee on a particular application. Full details of the scheme are available on the RDC website. We're joined in the chamber this morning by the following officers: Mike Hughes, Head of Planning; Matthew Worsley, Development Manager; Paula Slynn, Principal Senior Solicitor Planning; and James Layback, Principal Planning Officer. Also joined by two members of Democratic Services. We've got Julie Hollands, who is the Secretary for the committee, and Eleanor Drew, who is looking after our webcast. Joining us online, we have member of the committee, Councillor Tony Ganley, substitute member, Councillor Vicky Cook, and ward member, Councillor Paul Osborne. Just a reminder to those watching that Councillors Ganley and Cook cannot vote or move any items on the agenda, but they are allowed to take part in the discussions. Please remind members in the chamber to make sure that they turn their microphones on before speaking, face them while speaking, and to turn them off when they've finished. It's important that members speak clearly and directly into the microphone in front of them, and be careful not to block them with papers, iPads or laptops. Please also direct questions and comments to me rather than the officer, so that everyone can clearly hear what is being said. For those in the chamber this morning, there are no fire alarm tests due for today, so in the event of an alarm, all persons in the chamber are asked to leave by the nearest fire exit and to reassemble outside in the front car park to be accounted for. And finally, can I please make sure that everyone has turned their phones onto silent or off? Thank you. And now, sorry about that. And now moving on to the agenda. Agenda item 1. Do I have your authority to sign the minutes of the meetings of the planning committees held on the 16th of April 2026 and the meeting held on the 18th of May 2026 as a correct record of the proceedings?
Agreed.
Thank you. Do we have any apologies for absence and substitute members in attendance, please, Julie?
Yes, we have apologies from Councillor Stanger, and Councillor Mrs Cook is standing in as substitute for him.
Thank you. Are there any, agenda item 3, any additional agenda items?
No, there's none, Chair.
Thank you. And any withdrawn applications?
No, there's none.
Thank you. Agenda item 5, disclosure of interests and dispensations. To receive any disclosures by members of disclosable pecuniary interests and other registrable and non-registrable interests in matters on the agenda, the nature of any such interest and details of any dispensations obtained. Thank you. Agenda item 6, the Planning Applications Index. This document explains the Planning Committee's procedures and shows on the final page the applications being considered by the committee today. For each application, the officer will first present their report to the committee. Then, if it is subject to the public speaking scheme, any registered speakers will be invited to address the committee for up to 5 minutes on their previous written submissions. The committee then may also hear comments from the ward councillors before asking questions of the officer on their report and the application in general. Members will then be invited to make any comments they may have on the planning merits of the proposal themselves and debate the issues before proceeding to a vote on a motion. The members of the committee understand that planning matters can be very emotive, especially for those directly affected by the outcome. Nevertheless, I would like to ask everyone within the chamber to remain calm and courteous throughout the meeting. Thank you. Agenda item 7, application RR/2025/1499/P. Main Street land off in Peasmarsh. The proposal is the demolition of Garden House and the erection of 70 dwellings with access taken off Main Street, together with the provision of parking, landscaping, open space and associated infrastructure. The recommendation is it's resolved to grant full planning permission subject to. I'm going to read out the list now, but I won't read it out in full later. So it's subject to 1. Delegate authority to officers to satisfactorily resolve the outstanding district licence issue in consultation with Nature Space and satisfactory finalisation of 2. Planning conditions, including additional conditions and informatives in respect of the Great Crested Newts and the completion of a Section 106 agreement with the intention to secure provision of off-site highway works as required by East Sussex County Council Highway Authority, including works deemed necessary by the East Sussex County Council Rights of Way team, financial contributions as required by the East Sussex County Council Highway Authority for improvements to bus services serving the site, travel plan, provision of open space and ongoing management and maintenance, provision of sustainable drainage system and ongoing management and maintenance, policy compliant affordable housing provision, including an agreed cascade mechanism, 5% self-build and custom-build housing provision subject to a 12-month marketing campaign to identify purchasers, failing which they would revert to market sale, secure on-site and off-site biodiversity net gain provision, biodiversity net gain monitoring costs, Section 106 monitoring fee. Now you can understand why I didn't want to do that a second time. The officer in the case is James Layback. The ward members are Councillor Hacking and Councillor Osborne, and the reason for it being in the committee today is it was referred by Councillor Osborne on the grounds of local interest, highway issues, drainage issues and effect on the High Weald national landscape. This application is subject to the public speaking scheme. Therefore, the planning officer will present his report to the committee, and before members ask questions of the officer, the committee will hear from a representative from Peasmarsh Parish Council and the applicant's agent, and I believe Councillor Osborne, the ward councillor. Members will then ask questions of the officer before beginning their deliberations and eventually proceeding to a vote. James Layback will now present his report. James, please.
Thank you, Chair. So, application RR 2025-1499P seeks full planning permission for the demolition of the Garden House and the erection of 70 dwellings with access taken off Main Street together with the provision of parking, landscaping, open space and associated infrastructure. Members are directed to the update sheet which has been circulated. This details that the applicant has requested clarification on certain points, including works to the public right-of-way, the neutral impact on the listed Cock Inn, efficient use of land and affordable housing. The update also includes details of an additional letter of objection that has been received. So the site is located within the High Weald National Landscape and comprises of 2 adjoining fields subdivided by a hedgerow running through the site. The undeveloped fields are framed by mature trees and hedges, with the garden house, which is to be demolished to provide access from Main Street, also forming part of the site. The site falls outside but adjacent to the development boundary, with the Pippin site, which benefits from a resolution to grant planning permission for 41 dwellings to the east. To the west of the site is Jempson's, and to the north is the caravan site and Grade 2 listed Cock Inn. Public footpath 18 runs along the southern edge of the site, while public footpath 17 crosses the site and is to be diverted as part of the proposals. Next slide, please. As noted, the application site falls outside the development boundary and is not allocated. Development is therefore generally resisted unless a countryside location is demonstrated to be necessary. As set out in the report, the proposals would not meet the limited policy circumstances for new housing in the countryside. However, it is acknowledged that the Council cannot currently demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. As a result of this shortfall, policy restrictions relating to development boundaries are out of date, requiring the application to be considered in the context of paragraph 11D of the NPPF. The wording of this paragraph is shown on the slide and can be viewed in the report. Next slide, please. In regards to paragraph 14 of the NPPF, the application site was considered during the neighbourhood plan examination, and given access constraints, it was identified as possibly suitable long-term for residential development. Due to these access constraints, the application was not allocated, but the examiner did note that the site is well located in terms of access to services and has a strong degree of visual containment, minimising any impact on the national landscape. The neighbourhood plan did meet the identified housing requirements. However, these requirements were based on the core strategy, which was adopted in 2014, some 10 years before the neighbourhood plan was made and prior to the introduction of the standard method for calculating housing need. As a result, current housing requirements are now much higher. In this instance, given that the current higher housing requirements and the site being identified within the neighbourhood plan as possibly suitable for long-term residential development, the merits of the proposal in relation to paragraph 11 of the NPPF need to be considered. Next slide, please. With regards to a sustainable location for new housing, the site lies outside but adjacent to the development boundary, with a number of facilities and services within walking distance of the site. And the application also proposes additional pedestrian routes through the site as shown on the slide. County Highways and the Rights of Way team were consulted on the application, and as detailed in the report, they considered that subject to conditions and a legal agreement, the proposed development would be acceptable by travel modes other than private car. Next slide, please. In terms of the impact on the character of the area, including the High Weald National Landscape, the residential scheme would consist of 6 one-bedroom maisonettes, 35 two-bedroom houses, 14 three-bedroom houses, and 15 four-bedroom houses. The dwellings would be of 2-storey scale and finished with a mixture of brick, tile hanging, weatherboard and clay roof tiles. The proposal would provide a generous area of open space and a SUDS attenuation pond, and it would retain the existing mature trees forming the hedgerow between the fields, as well as providing new trees and hedgerows. Next slide, please. As shown on the slide, the external appearance of the dwellings are considered reflective of the High Weald vernacular, with articulation and visual interest created through the combination of dwelling types and architectural detailing, including porches, gables, chimneys and covered parking. The use of 3 distinct materials comprising of cladding, tile hanging and brickwork also helps to break up the elevations. Next slide, please. Turning back to the site plan on the screen, the vehicular access into the site would be from Main Street via the demolition of the garden house. The access would be between existing properties and have a width of approximately 5.5 metres, with footways provided on both sides of the access leading into the site. The layout creates a strong streetscape with built form, creating a hierarchy within the streets that supports movement across the site and wider area. The layout aids the transition from residential development to amenity space and to the open countryside beyond, while retaining the existing mature trees that divide the site and reinforcing existing hedgerows. Final details of the landscaping and building design can be conditioned to ensure they are appropriate. Next slide, please. In considering the proposals, it needs to be demonstrated whether the scheme constitutes, it needs to be determined whether the scheme constitutes major development in the national landscape within the meaning of paragraph 190 and footnote 67 of the NPPF. The wording of footnote 67 can be seen on the slide, and accordingly, whether the proposal constitutes major development in the High Weald national landscape is a matter for the decision maker. Next slide, please. The proposals would result in a noticeable increase in the number of dwellings in Peasmarsh. However, the site is well located, being adjacent to the development boundary and the supermarket, caravan site and residential dwellings. And while it would represent an incursion into undeveloped land, the residential development with associated open space provision and landscaping would be compatible with these nearby uses. The site is relatively well contained within the landscape by virtue of the surrounding development and topography, and would provide a logical extension to the settlement as identified in the neighbourhood plan. With the neighbourhood plan examiner acknowledging that this strong degree of visual containment would result in any impact on the AONB being minimalised. The proposals are also considered to represent a suitably landscape-led design that provides an opportunity to conserve and enhance the surrounding landscape with new tree and hedge planting and the provision of open space with improved public access. Accordingly, while the proposed development results in some localised harm, when having regards to paragraph 189, 190 and footnote 67 of the NPPF, the proposals are not considered to be major development in the High Weald national landscape. The proposals would also have an acceptable impact on the character and appearance of the area, and they would not result in a degree of harm that would justify refusal when considered alongside the proposal's significant benefits. Next slide, please. Turning to highway and transport impacts, both the national and county highways have appraised the scheme. National Highways did not consider that the proposals would have an unacceptable impact and raised no objection. East Sussex Highways and Rights of Way assessed the proposals in terms of the site access for pedestrians and vehicles, traffic generation, highway impact, internal layout, on-site parking and the diversion of footpath 17. They have no objections to the proposal subject to standard conditions. They have also requested off-site works and financial contributions, which include those shown on the slide. With regards to the financial contributions, it is noted that these will go towards improving bus services serving the site, including the provision of later evening journeys and a Sunday service on the 313 bus route, and also the provision of the Flexi bus service. For these reasons, and subject to conditions and the completion of a legal agreement, the proposed development is acceptable in relation to highway and transport impacts. Next slide, please. Turning to affordable housing, the application would provide 28 affordable homes on site, which equates to a 40% on-site affordable housing provision. The homes would be delivered as 6 one-bed maisonettes, 18 two-bed houses and 4 three-bed houses. The Council's Housing Enabling and Development Officer is supportive of the application, which includes a policy compliant percentage of affordable housing, and in this instance they have recommended the inclusion of a cascade mechanism in any legal agreement. The final details of the cascade mechanism would be agreed in consultation with the Housing Enabling and Development Officer. This should, however, contain a preferred option of a policy compliant mix of affordable housing, an opportunity for wholly shared ownership, and an opportunity to pay a commuted sum should there not be any on-site interest from registered providers. With regards to DASA policy DHG6, the applicant has advised that it is intended for service plots to be provided for self and custom build house builders, and this would be secured through a legal agreement. In relation to housing mix, the proposals would consist of 8.6% one-bed units, 50% two-bed units, 20% three-bed units, and 21.4% four-bed units. While compliant with the core strategy policy LHN1, this would conflict with the neighbourhood plan policy H1, which requires that at least 60% of dwellings would be two-bedroom, with approximately 20% one-bedroom and 20% four-bedroom. In this instance, while the housing mix does conflict with policy H1, the proposals would provide a scheme with over 58% being smaller units, and as such, this non-compliance with policy H1 would not be considered a reason on its own for refusing the application. Turning to flood risk and drainage, the development is at low risk of flooding from all sources. With regards to foul sewage, Southern Water were consulted on the proposals. They would require a formal application for a connection to the public sewer to be made, and subject to conditions, Southern Water raised no objection to the proposed foul or surface water drainage and did not raise any concerns regarding capacity. With regards to the disposal of surface water, following the submission of additional information, the lead local flood authority raised no objections subject to conditions. In terms of the drainage, it is acknowledged that concerns have been raised locally in regard to the capacity of the sewer system. Accordingly, conditions 3 and 5 are recommended, which require full details of foul and surface water drainage to be submitted and approved prior to commencement of the development. And subject to conditions, the proposed development is considered acceptable in relation to flood risk and drainage. In regards to the amenities of neighbouring properties, as members will have noted during the site visit, the proposed access will be between the existing dwellings, Puddle Dock and the Hollies. There is sufficient space to incorporate landscaping and to provide a buffer to the neighbouring garden areas, with neither the associated vehicle movements or the proximity of the proposed dwellings considered to have an unacceptable impact on the amenities of these neighbouring properties. The application site is also bounded by Oaklands and the caravan site, and given the layout and proposed boundary treatments, it is not considered that the proposals would have an unacceptable impact on these neighbours either. In addition, a construction management plan, as well as restrictions on construction hours and deliveries, would address noise, dust and light impacts during the construction phase of the development. Accordingly, subject to conditions, the proposed development is acceptable in relation to the potential impacts on the amenities of neighbouring properties. In terms of ecology and biodiversity, various ecological documents have been submitted in support of the proposal. These were reviewed by the county ecologist and by NatureSpace in relation to great crested newts. Subject to the applicant providing evidence that they have entered into the district licence scheme for great crested newts, it's considered that the proposed development can be supported from an ecological perspective, subject to conditions. In terms of BNG, the submitted information suggests the proposals would result in an on-site gain exceeding 10%. This is considered a significant on-site gain and will be secured by legal agreement. In considering heritage impact, the proposals will not cause harm to designated assets or to their setting, and in regards to below-ground archaeology, the proposals will be subject to a programme of archaeological works which will be secured by condition. Next slide, please. Turning to the planning balance and conclusion, it is acknowledged that the Council cannot currently demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. Having regard to paragraph 14 of the NPPF, the application site is identified within the neighbourhood plan as possibly suitable for development in the long term, and as such, residential development at the site would not be in conflict with the neighbourhood plan. The housing requirements of the neighbourhood plan were also based on the core strategy, which was adopted in 2014, some 10 years before the neighbourhood plan was made and prior to the introduction of the standard method for calculating housing need, with housing requirements now much higher. The proposal is in conflict with the neighbourhood plan housing mix. However, it is important to consider that the site is providing a scheme with a majority of smaller units, and the fact that much needed market and affordable housing is being provided. This non-compliance with the housing mix policy would not be considered a reason on its own for refusing the application. As such, the adverse impact of allowing development that conflicts with the housing mix requirement on a site that is recognised as possibly suitable for development in the long term is not in this instance considered to significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits, and therefore the proposals need to be assessed against the policies in the NPPF taken as a whole. Turning to paragraph 11D1, this states that permission should not be granted when the application of policies in the NPPF that protect areas of particular importance, such as the national landscapes, provide a strong reason for refusing the development proposed. It is therefore necessary to consider if the development would present harm to the national landscape, and if so, would that harm outweigh the benefits for non-major development in the High Weald national landscape. In this regard, given the greenfield nature of the site, the development would see the introduction of built form, hard surfacing and associated infrastructure, which would clearly change the landscape character of the site, with this localised harm acknowledged. This, however, does not mean that the national landscape designation precludes development, and as highlighted, the central hedgerow within the site would be retained, with boundary hedges also reinforced. New planting would also be provided, helping enhance the landscape and visual qualities of the open space with improved public access. As such, the proposals would not have a significant adverse effect on the High Weald national landscape. In this regard, it is considered that the economic, social and environmental benefits associated with boosting the supply of housing and the provision of much needed affordable housing would outweigh the harm to the landscape and scenic beauty of the High Weald national landscape. As such, the harm to the High Weald national landscape would not constitute a strong reason for refusing the proposal, and accordingly, paragraph 11D2 of the NPPF is engaged. And as identified, there would be some harm to the national landscape, including diversion of the public footpath that crosses the site. Great weight is attached to this harm. It is, however, an important consideration that this harm would be highly localised, with the site being relatively well contained within the landscape and providing a logical extension to the settlement. The proposal would also have a neutral effect on the setting of a Grade 2 listed building and would conflict with the neighbourhood plan housing mix policy. Against this, there is the pressing need for housing when considering the current shortfall. As such, the delivery of 69 additional dwellings, which are in a sustainable location, would make a significant contribution towards the area's housing supply. The delivery of market units attracts significant weight in favour of the proposal. This is also the case for affordable dwellings. Given the significant need for affordable housing, the policy compliant provision of affordable housing is a significant benefit of the development proposal. The proposal also provides housing for a range of different household types and sizes, and in relation to matters such as impacts on the character and appearance of the area, biodiversity, highways, neighbouring amenity and drainage issues, the use of planning conditions and a planning obligation would make the development acceptable in planning terms. The development would provide jobs, but this is largely limited to the construction phase, and it's also in good proximity to services and facilities, providing alternative options to car travel. New residents would also support local services and facilities through increased expenditures. Furthermore, the scheme would result in upgrades to bus stop provision, improvements to pedestrian access, and secure a financial contribution to local bus services, a significant benefit. The housing development also represents a suitable design and would conserve and reinforce existing planting and enhance with new native planting, along with improved public access. Accordingly, in this instance, it is considered that the planning benefits of the development would not be significantly and demonstrably outweighed by adverse impacts when assessed against the NPPF as a whole. It is therefore recommended that planning permission is granted, subject to resolving the outstanding district licence issue and the satisfactory finalisation of conditions and the completion of a Section 106 agreement with the intention to secure the heads of terms as detailed in the report and shown on the slide. Thank you.
Thank you, James. We then come to public speaking. We will hear first from the Parish Council representative, then the agent for the application, and then finally Councillor Osborne. I remind all speakers that comments should focus on material planning consideration, and in Rother's procedure, public speakers must not introduce new information that was not included in their written submission. Each speaker will have up to 5 minutes to address the committee. I will interrupt anyone who is still speaking at the 5-minute mark. So first, it's a change, if anyone saw who we had speaking, it's a change today. From Peasmarsh Parish Council, we have Councillor Gina Sanderson. Councillor Sanderson, thank you.
Hope you can hear me. I am a Peasmarsh Parish Councillor and I was also the Vice Chairman of the Neighbourhood Planning Group. So I have quite a long history of understanding the planning issues in the village. Concerns that we're going to bring forward today are concerns that were highlighted in both the neighbourhood plan, in the local plan consultation, and in our response to this site application. Obviously, we have people in the village who are NIMBYs. Obviously, we have people who are worried because it affects their house directly. But the main issue that people in Peasmarsh have is that we have severe flooding problems which are not being identified because they are neither river nor coastal flooding, but pluvial flooding. We have a groundwater issue. You only have to put a spade into the ground and go 2 spits deep and you've got water. We're called Peasmarsh for a reason. We are right at the edge of the High Weald and where the sandstone rock formations finish and Peasmarsh is solid clay. The highest point in the village, the church, they have to pump out the digging of the graves whenever they dig a grave. There is a real groundwater issue. That impacts on the surface water issue because surface water can't go into the groundwater, can't go into the ground because there's a very high water table, and so we get regular flooding. At the moment, this site acts as a huge sump for the village. That's where the water is. It doesn't cope most winters, and it is getting worse. At the moment, we have at least 80 houses directly affected, mainly at the moment just their gardens, although in some cases it's lapping up onto patios, from Townhouse Lane, which is to the west of the site, and flooding from the fields goes down into the Jempsons complex. On the south side of Main Street, the houses along Main Street, alongside where Garden Cottage is, and to the east, Griffin Lane and Farley's Way. As I say, there are about 80 houses where there is severe flooding most winters, at the moment contained in the gardens. It contributes to the flooding that we have every year at the bottom of School Lane and at Townhouse Lane. So Townhouse Lane is the lane leading to Jempsons, and there's flooding there most years. And School Lane is at the eastern end of the village. Those surface water issues put strain on our sewage system. And we know that Southern Water says that it has the capacity. We do have a separate foul water system, but that only exists for those houses that have been built since 1990. Those who joined the system, which I think was in about 1953, were built, well, it's a mixed system. So we have sewage and water running down the same drainage system. We have an issue with both the Peasmarsh water pumping station and also the Iden water treatment works. The water treatment works has, so far this year, Iden water treatment works have had 56 dumps of raw sewage straight into the River Rother for 1,304 hours. They only open up the waste water pumping site at Peasmarsh and use that to go straight into the Rother when Iden is completely overwhelmed. So far this year, we've had 27 dumps for 283 hours. The capacity that Southern Water talks about is the capacity that is there because they can open the gates quite legally and pour raw foul water into the Rother.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. That's the 5 minutes. Thank you. I'll let you
That's
finish
what I
that
wanted
point.
to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just before you sit down, can I actually thank you for that? And also, I want to acknowledge the Parish Council's written submission. It's very clear, well structured, and generally helpful to members for understanding the issues. And I wish other councils did similar. Thank you.
I think that's partly because of the work we did on the neighbourhood plan and the help we had from Rosa in doing that.
Thank you. We now move on to speaker 4. It's the agent for the applicant, Lucy Wilford. Good morning.
Good morning, members, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. As you'll be aware and set out by your officers, there is a significant housing need in the district with a requirement for 912 homes per year. This is in sharp contrast to the current adopted plan, which only plans for 335 homes. Consequently, the council is not able to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. Based on the council's own evidence, the total net annual affordable housing need on its own is at least 325 affordable homes a year for the period 2021 to 2044. Since 2021, Rother has delivered just 312 affordable homes, representing a deficit of over 1,000 against the need. As set out by your officers, the proposals comprise 70 homes, of which 40% will be affordable in line with adopted policy. These are matters which are afforded substantial weight, as set out in the committee report. The site is recognised in the adopted neighbourhood plan as suitable for housing, acknowledging this to be a potential location for development in a new local plan, with development set back from the southwestern boundary of the site. The council is now in the process of preparing this new local plan, which seeks to allocate this site. The proposals align with this allocation, with the site recognised as a sustainable location for development, as also acknowledged in the committee report. The proposals have been developed in close consultation with the council, with the applicant first engaging in pre-application discussions in August 2024. The proposals evolved, taking a landscape and design-led approach. The site is well contained by development to Main Street, Pippins and Jempsons, which immediately border the site. The development area has been shaped by landscape advice, with development set back from the southwestern boundary, also reflecting the advice in the neighbourhood plan. where a new area of publicly accessible open space is to be delivered, providing a soft transition to the countryside and represents 30% of the site area. The oval arrangement and architectural appearance has been guided by our officers throughout the pre-application and post-submission process to ensure the delivery of a locally distinctive and high-quality development. This has included officers ensuring development makes the most efficient use of the site, recognising the housing need, and to ensure the development achieves a mix of new homes providing a range of 1 to 4 bed properties with a high proportion of smaller housing. This represents about 58% of the total development on site. All homes are NDSS M42 compliant, will incorporate air source heat pumps and EV charging. The access design onto Main Street is supported by a road safety audit. This was assessed as acceptable by County Highways, while also taking into account the development of Pippins. The wider impact of the development on the local road network is also considered acceptable, and measures are proposed to enhance existing bus stop provision alongside contributions towards bus services. The proposals incorporate the public rights-of-way crossing the site. Whilst the route will need to be diverted through the development, as acknowledged in the committee report, a more verdant route still can be taken following the line of existing retained mature trees. Along this route are areas of rest in the form of benches which will enhance the overall experience. The majority of existing mature trees will be retained on the site, retaining the sense of enclosure. East Sussex Ecology is satisfied that development will provide ecological mitigation with ecological enhancements, specifically in respect of BNG, achieving at least 18% gain, which is considered a significant benefit on site. East Sussex is also satisfied from a drainage perspective and has been demonstrated that development will not increase the risk of flooding on or off site, and that's all forms of flooding, including surface water, with new SUDS features to be incorporated and designed to allow for 40% climate change. As also set out by officers, there are further planning conditions attached to any consent should it be granted, which provides further detailed technical designs to be submitted for approval. In conclusion, there is a dire need for market affordable homes in Rotherham now. Kitewood is committed to the delivery of the development and as such has made a full planning application to ensure it can come forward without delay. The site is sustainably located and is recognised to be a suitable and sustainable location for development in the adopted neighbourhood plan and the emerging local plan. The proposals have been developed in close consultation with your officers, which are recommending to you that permission be granted. We therefore respectfully request that you endorse your officer's recommendation to approve. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Osborne, I must admit, I was assuming you would want to address the committee.
Yes, if I may, Chairman, and good morning, everybody. You mentioned the letter you had from Peasmarsh Parish Council and hoped that every other parish would do the same. I would say it's probably under the guidance of a decent ward member, but there it is. I called this to committee for the sort of simple reason that when the application was made originally, there was a large sort of swell of groundswell, if you like, and the parish council meeting at the time, there was probably 50 to 60 members of the public there. Considering there's usually about 3, that's good enough reason for me to call it in. So there is a fair bit of concern over this one. I think the issue is that there's sort of potentially two large sites now, very close proximity to each other, which is fine, but you've got 2 separate entrances on a reasonably busy road, the A268 through the centre of Peasmarsh. So the two sort of site entrances will be literally 200 yards apart. The speed limit, I know, has been mentioned that can be moved. It's currently 30 miles an hour, but the 40-mile-an-hour zone is only about 50 yards away, so that can be moved down nearer to the bottom of the hill or outside of the village if it comes to it. But it must be noted that every month I go to Peasmarsh Parish Council, and their Black Cat device and speed indicator device indicates that some 30,000 vehicles per month activate that sign. So speed in excess of the 30-mile limit is an issue in the village. Sewerage has been mentioned by Gina from the parish council. Surface water has almost also been mentioned. I would say actual fresh water is a supply issue as well. We're supplied, Peasmarsh is supplied by Southeast Water, Southeast Water. Currently there's, as we speak, I think there's something like 20,000 homes sort of 25 miles away with little or no water pressure. So for them to keep saying that they can supply sort of starts to sort of think, well, can you really? Can you supply? And the sewage again, we can cope with it. Well, can you? I don't know. It's a question to be asked. So it's a difficult one. I know we're constrained by government, and government want more places built, and we haven't got the land supply, but it doesn't mean to say it's the right decision to grant approval. I don't know what much else I can add to it, Chairman. I just have to wait for the deliberations and see what comes out of it. But thanks for the opportunity to speak. Thank you very much.
As do we all, Councillor Osborne. I have to wait to see what comes out of it. Thank you for that. So now we go into question time for the officer. So questions for the officer first, please. I've got Councillor McLaren and Councillor Mary Barnes to start with. Councillor McLaren.
Thank you, Chair. My question relates to the disposal of sewage. I'd like to ask that in answering my question, please consider the cumulative requirement for handling sewage from both this and the adjacent Pippins site. So my question is, what evidence is there that Southern Water can handle this increased demand without increasing the amount of sewage released into the local river system? Thank you.
Thank you.
So, thank you for the question. In answer to that, have consulted Southern Water, and they have advised that they do have capacity to sort of serve the site in terms of their disposal of it into the rivers. I don't have that information to answer that.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much for looking into that. I guess my question is really specifically worded, which is not, do Southern Water say that they have no issue, because that's clear from the documentation. My question is, what evidence do we have that they can do this without increasing the amount of sewage that is pumped into the local river system?
I think it's you, James, unless Matthew's coming in.
Thank you, Chair. Southern Water haven't provided evidence with their response. However, we don't have counter evidence to say that there definitely will be an issue. Thank you.
I think before I come on to Councillor Barnes, I think this more than most has raised that question to us about the quality of the responses we get from consultees, and that a lot of this is they didn't say they couldn't, so we've got to assume they can, which is not ideal. But unless we start, perhaps, can we, I'm not sure if we're allowed to ask more detailed questions, because I would just mention, in passing on Councillor Osborne's point, do we ever ask South East Water about the supply features to a development?
Thank you, Chair. I would add to my comments just now that we acknowledge the level of concern about the drainage and reference to discharge to the River Rother. And James in his presentation also explained about the conditions we are recommending. So prior to development, full details of drainage in consultation with Southern Water, what we could I mean, members are open to alter conditions if you're minded to support. I know we're not there yet, but you could add in the EA as a consultee. And you know, they're the ones who release this data on discharge to the river Rother.
Okay, Councillor, I'm sure you can think of something else and you'll be back later. Councillor Barnes, then Councillor Creaser.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to ask the officer, the question of the housing numbers were doubled. They went from 30-something to 70-something. And although I would like to, obviously, would like to link that with the possibility that they might have thought about the flooding issue, was that in the interests of Peasmarsh or of the local area? Because it seems to me that by putting an extra 30-odd houses on the site, you're doubling up on traffic use and all the other things that are a problem with the area. But first of all, why did you decide to make so many more houses on the site?
So in terms of the additional houses, sort of as noted in the report, the policy mix requirement in the neighbourhood plan is predominantly for the smaller units. So the initial discussions, the sort of houses that came forward were larger units. So in terms of redesigning that with the smaller units, that increased the numbers for the site. And then in terms of the site having been identified and its limited sort of wider visual impact, seeking to maximise the use of the site there for housing.
So the concern about the narrow access to the site, to all the other things that go with having 70 houses worth of people, was not a consideration. The consideration was to be able to enable the government to have more houses on the site. Would that be right?
In terms of the consideration, the Highways Authority and the League Local Flood Authority were also involved in the discussions, obviously, in terms of the access that was considered, and it could support the development proposed as well as the surface water drainage and the flood risk issues. They could be mitigated. So the sort of design was led by input from the Highways Authority as well as the League Local Flood Authority. So it wasn't led by the housing number, it was sort of design led by the site.
Could I just ask then about this attenuation tank, which appears to be the decorative feature at the lower end of the site? That's absolutely huge in comparison with the scale of the houses. I take it that is an attenuation tank. Where will that drain?
So the attenuation tank would release the water at a controlled rate into the combined sewer system. So as heard, infiltration is possible at the site.
Is that part of the so-called relaxation leisure part of the site? Because I couldn't see much else.
Sorry, could you repeat that? I didn't hear.
It's very closely packed, isn't it? Where are these poor people, particularly the people in the maisonettes, going to have a relaxation place? Normally on our new estates, we have some area where the public can actually meet together, form some sort of a community. There is, as far as I can see, pretty well none on that. But then this is a question for the general debate. But I'm just concerned about the crammed-in level of the housing, and also the fact that this huge attenuation tank is necessary to deal with the wastewater of 70 houses.
So just in response to that, the area at the south of the site would be public open spaces. There are sort of benches proposed within the site on the plans. In terms of the size of the attenuation pond, that was sort of what was required, but it would also have the biodiversity benefits as well as just the flooding, so it's not
Thank you. While you're mulling that one over, Councillor Barnes, Councillor Creaser, and then Councillor Mear.
The mention of schools in the report saying that the school is actually quite full, and so is the nursery situation. The next schools to that are in Rye or in Beckley. I know exactly where they are because my kids used to go to those schools. Now, I think the thing of it is what concerns me is Peacemarsh is a very good school indeed. And if you're going to bring not just these 70 homes, but the other ones on Pippins as well, the other homes there, where are the children going to go to school? We're talking about kids going to school elsewhere. It's not so bad if you've got teenage children, but when you have primary age children, you can't really be shuffling about all over the place, which is very worrying for the parents. Now, quite a few of these homes, I would imagine, would have young families in. If they are not already in existence, and if they've got a nice new home, they make more babies and we need more places. And that's not that. The other thing is the nearest place to see a doctor is either in Northiam or Rye. There don't seem to be much of a nod towards that.
We're straying into debate. Your question, I'm saying to the officer, is obviously where the kid's going to go to school.
Exactly.
What was the response from the education?
There was no response from the education department at East Sussex County Council. Had tried to chase them. I mean, obviously, in terms of if it was approved, there would be the SIL contributions that could be used to provide sort of the infrastructure requirements for the area. So potentially on school and doctor spending.
So that was.
Forgot dentists.
I think your one's gone a bit quiet, James. There is a possibility of SIL contributions to improve local schools. Councillor Mear, then Councillor Gray.
Yes, Mr. Layback, I got three questions. The first one concerns the position of the National Landscape Design Guide. And I'd like confirmation that that is a material consideration in our deliberations. I note that it was adopted by this council on the 6th of July 2020. I remember that because I was there. So can I have confirmation that that is a material consideration in our deliberations?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. The second, just a point, Southern Water are treated almost as if they were a statutory consultee, but they're not actually a statutory consultee. I think that's right, isn't it?
Yes, that's my understanding.
And the third question is that whether or not this is a major development in the national landscape is a question for the decision maker, namely ourselves, the councillors sitting around this table.
Yes, as you're making the decision, that would be your decision to make.
No doubt we will be advised in due course as to the considerations that we need to think about. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Chair. And firstly, thank you very much, James, for your very helpful report and presentation, and also for allowing us to do the site visit, which was very helpful. I'm afraid I'm going back to the problem of sewage. And my question you may not be able to answer, but how can we have any trust at all in Southern Water that they can deal with this when very clearly they're not coping with the present demand? The figures given for the outage of raw sewage into the river is truly shocking. And if that is happening now with the current position, how on earth are they going to cope? And to say that they can cope when they're not coping, how can we believe that?
Yeah, without having sort of comments back from them in relation to those points, I'm not able to sort of offer any further input on that.
My understanding, but I'll come to Matt, is that as a statutory undertaker rather than consultee, their opinion has weight, but it can be questioned. But on technical details, and of course the people who supply the technical details are Southern Water, so we're a bit in a vicious circle there. but I think I've got a reading through stuff that the current problems technically are operational problems. As an undertaker, if we approve this, they have to supply the foul water system. But they don't have to give us a timescale. And their current system, which they say is coping with these discharges, which are legal, but they're allowed to do it. So in fact, the statutory consultee is the Environment Agency, and perhaps we needed to have, or they need to get more involved in planning rather than Southern Water. But it was Matt or Mike just going to tell me I'm talking through my...
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I was going to come in, we're currently in questions, and I think my comment probably more to some degree relates to debate, but I think hopefully it will be helpful. Look, you know, we're not here as council or officers to defend the conduct or otherwise of water companies. That's for them to account for. What I would say is that they are, for better or worse, they are the technical experts on this, and we've heard the parish council's point of view. But they, together with the lead local flood authority, are saying that this is okay. So I'm going to sound a warning and then make a suggestion. So my warning would be, given that, to go into an appeal situation with anecdotal evidence, albeit sort of fairly strong, but with no evidence against those bodies that are saying it's okay, opens this council up to costs and would not be a sensible way to move forward, would be my strong advice to you. What I would say, I said I would offer a potential way forward. You've got conditions 3 and 5, which James talked about. You know, they are strong conditions, no development to take place until the details have been agreed. You know, these are not just waved through, these are significant. And when you look at when you look at the neighbourhood plan, it's clear there of some of the issues with foul water. So what I would suggest is, I think to refuse on the basis of sewage would be very tricky, as I've said. What I would suggest in condition 3, I think, and this is exceptionally, is where it says in consultation with Southern Water, as Matt has already said, I would add the Environment Agency to that. That would deal with the stream issue. I would also, given the expertise that's very clear from the parish council's response, I would add in consultation with the parish council as well, so they can participate in that. That, I think, then does as much as we can within the system that we've got to address this. One final thing I would say is that, to be very clear, the parish council or the EA don't get veto on that. They're very important consultees, but the government charge us with determining these conditions. We don't subcontract that to other people. So, but I think I would suggest that if you were minded to approve, that you add the words in consultation with Southern Water, which is already there, the Environment Agency, as Matt said, and the parish council to there. I think that's as much as we can do, being frank, within the current system. Sorry that was so lengthy.
No, thank you. Are there any more questions? Councillor Groner.
Yes, I was just going to ask James, the mixture of housing, I think you said, fell outside of the recommended policies, but I just wanted to know how that was possible when the total number of units doubled. So there was obviously a lot of flexibility before the initial plan to the current plan. How did we still arrive at numbers that don't comply?
I think in terms of the mix, there's also that there's a sort of full complement of on-site affordable housing provided. So to have the sort of even, to make the mix, as it were, would then make sort of the rest of the scheme less viable in terms of being able to provide the affordable housing. So it's having that balance of the size of the dwellings and the provision of the affordable housing. So it's having that mix in order to sort of make the best use of the site there. And so, yeah, in order to provide the affordable, the mix is slightly below the requirement of the neighbourhood plan.
Thanks, James. And moving on from the word viability, has this all been budgeted with recent costs and based on current house prices, which seem to be sort of declining rather than increasing? I mean, is this scheme viable?
As my understanding is that it is viable, and that's why the intention is to provide the affordable housing on site. So if that was to change in the future, then it will be looked at then, but what is in front of us is considered viable and deliverable.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for the officers? I've got one. It's a very minor one, but it was brought up by Councillor Osborne. Presumably it's a highways question. This idea of this axis being within 200 metres of the Pippins access, presumably the highways could have said, we don't want too close together, you'll have to find a way of joining it. It's not for us, but the highways who haven't objected to this except for moving the speed limit down the road, they could have said something if they'd wanted to.
Yeah, the highways in their comments did talk about the relationship between the two accesses, and they considered that the distance was sufficient, that it would be safe. And just in terms of a point of clarification, in terms of the moving of the speed limit, I raised that incorrectly at the site meeting. The speed limit restrictions aren't to be changed, but the access has been designed in accordance with a 40-mile-an-hour limit, even though it's within the 30 zone. So it takes into account that vehicles have been recorded speeding there, so the visibility display is achievable for what would be a 40-mile-an-hour limit, even though it is actually in the 30-mile-an-hour limit.
Thank you. Probably because I'm aware years ago that there's so many rules on speed limits. Presumably that's because they couldn't move it because it would conflict with other things that say you can't have a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit where X, Y, and Z apply, so that they're making this display fit the 40, even though it's just in the 30.
Yeah, that's my understanding. I think as part of the sort of Section 278 works that will need to be signed off by highways if there are any sort of safety issues raised as part of that, then perhaps it would be looked at then if it needed moving. But as it is, it's, yeah, acknowledged that there is speeding in the area and has been designed to accord
Thank you.
with a higher
That's
speed limit.
prompted another question from Councillor McLaren, and Councillor Barnes is thinking one over. Councillor McLaren first, then Councillor Barnes.
My question does not follow on from that answer, so if yours does, may I let you go? No, yours. Okay, thank you very much. I'd just like to ask for a little bit of help to understand how adding to condition 3, consultation with the Environment Agency, how that helps in terms of understanding more, managing more, I don't know, how does it help with the release of additional sewage into the river?
So this committee can't change, how we deal with sewage across England, and you may well have some very forthright views about that. But what we have to do is operate within the system. So what it would do is, if it was granted approval, they would have to provide full details of what's going to happen to the foul sewage, and we would then discuss that with Southern Water and the Environment Agency and the Parish Council, given they've got unsurpassed local knowledge, and we would have to come to a view as to whether that was acceptable or not. So it's a further additional safeguard, but we can't change how we deal with foul sewage as a country.
Thank you.
Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Jim. It was just really asking James to explain what he meant when he described the layout of the estate as being one that tailed off so that gradually it was less bulky as it went out into presumably the countryside beyond it. But when I looked at the plan on the screen just now, I couldn't see any evidence of any less bulk or more bulk or what have you anywhere on that plan. It's just one big massive house layout. Can he explain what he meant?
Just to say, Matt's having problems trying to get that back up on the screen.
In terms of answer to that, looking at the sort of plan view of the site, yeah, they do appear, the detached houses, as sort of all attached. So the ones sort of closest to the attenuation pond there are actually detached, linked with covered carports. So from a sort of elevational point of view, they're not as dense as the units that are closer to the entrance, which include sort of terraces and detached. So,
Despite the fact they're all two-storey.
yeah, but there will be gaps between the sort of housing, sort of covered carports, so it looks like they're continuous units, but
The attenuation tank is the sort of introduction to the countryside beyond. Okay.
Thank you. Just before we come to you, Councillor. No, I will come to you, Councillor Graham, because I forgot what I was going to say.
Councillor Mear first.
Me? Yes, I was just about to make a very unpopular suggestion to officers. Condition number 3, would there be any prospect of that decision coming back to the committee? I'm sure that's unpopular.
I'll take that just as Matt is wrestling with various bits of IT. It is within your gift to ask for that, and it's within your gift at the moment to insist on that, actually. It's a decision for you to take. I would argue that strengthening it with the wording I've said is enough. You could say that you wanted it to come back to committee. One thing I would say is that we could only do that very sparingly as a committee. The minute you start dealing with lots of discharge of conditions, the whole system is thrown into chaos. And let's be honest, that's the government's very clear intention not to do that at the moment with the National Scheme of Delegation. But if you were minded to, you could. Thank you.
Just before I come to you, Matt, I would just say I remember one coming a couple of years ago that was from 3 years before, and this committee sat there going, why are we being asked to decide this? Because the moment had gone from like 5 years ago when it was important. But yeah, and can I just say before I come to you, Matt, it came back to me that possibly by involving the parish council, I know it will be specifically on this scheme, but it gives the parish council an opportunity to introduce to the EA all the problems with the 80 houses that are flooding and the flooding down the bottom of Tanhouse Lane. They probably can't discuss it in terms of this application, but at least it's a starting point for the parish council and the EA.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to raise that exact same point. The Clavering Walk application west of Bexhill, for those not familiar, right next to the Pevensey levels, drainage issues, significant drainage issues, and there was rightly a lot of concern, both from officers and the committee at the time, and exceptionally we agreed to report that discharge of condition application back to committee. Yeah, Councillor Drayson is right, it was years on from the original decision, and then you're faced with a lot of technical details, and you're reliant on these, you know, well, what have the EA said, what have Southern Water said, and, you know, if you decide to add the parish in as well. However, it is in your gift. So just bear those things in mind, though. Thank you.
Councillor Graham.
Yes, it's sort of a question and an observation. The question is, just out of general interest, not specific to this, but why is the EA not on a list of all the other, because it's quite an extensive list of organisations that are being spoken to.
James, I think you...
Is that a policy thing, or is that...
They were on the list, but they didn't...
Just so that we know for our own benefit.
yeah, I think in terms of this one, they didn't have any comments to provide on it at the time, from my understanding.
So then my observation would be that, you know, when we're dealing with private companies and we're looking for technical assurance, I think it's the responsibility of the council to seek evidence in the positive, meaning you have to prove you are not doing this, rather than expecting the committee to say, well, you have to prove that it isn't happening the other way, because that is not in our gift and it is in those. So it has to be a balance, especially when a private company is involved who is financially penalised in some regards and is therefore not a disinterested party. I think the role of the EA must be much more important at that point, You know, this is the only way we get a counterbalance is if we get truly objective, empirical information or information that's been tested by an outside party. And I just think that's a general comment and a general note on how we approach developments going forward.
Sorry, thank you. I think what Mike was just saying to me is that comment about I know I think a couple of us referred to it as an attenuation tank. It is a pond. It's not a tank, it's a pond. Right, if there's no more questions, we will enter the discussion stage, and members are free to discuss. Well, I'll start because it's not that important, but I was shocked to see that the Sussex Police Crime Commissioner were asking for a contribution towards policing this development. Luckily, it's, as the officer said in the report, that doesn't decide whether or not it goes ahead, and so it won't be part of the 106. But I thought it was scary that the police are asking for money to police a new area, because next we'll have the East Sussex Fire and Rescue saying, well, if you want us to send a fire engine to that estate, you better give us another bit of money. So I think, it was right not to put it in the 106, but I couldn't believe the cheek of it, sort of. And I would have thought, I suppose it is a question in a way, I would have thought by now, and I was in the police in 1974, that by now designers, builders, architects are fully au fait with the crime prevention advice that was so new 30 years ago, and it's all incorporated in the plans anyway. And so for them to say, oh, well, we'll give advice on the design, I suspect everything's included that the police ever thought about. But there we go. I enjoyed my time in the police. Any matters for the discussion? Councillor Barnes.
Since we apparently now have the right to say whether this is a major development or not, does that put us in the category of the tilted balance?
I think, and I'm ready for the officers or for Paula to tell me, it's in the tilted balance if we say it's not a major development. If we say it's a major development, that takes it into a whole new ballgame. Am I right in thinking that? Yeah? The tilted balance doesn't apply if it's a major development, other things apply. And if it isn't a major development, then the tilted balance does apply.
So I think I'll say a couple of things to that. We've taken the view that it's not a major development for the purposes of the NPPF. James has set out the reasons why. From an officer perspective, we don't think that's an on-balance decision. We think, given the context it's seen within the context of existing built development, it rounds off the edge of the settlement. We don't think it's major. We don't think it has a serious adverse impact on the natural beauty. It's open to you to come to a different conclusion. If you do come to the conclusion that it's major development, we'd have to, we then have to go through a whole series of different tests. Officer's view would still be that it does meet those tests because there is such a need for housing, but that's your decision to make. In terms of the tilted balance, officers think it does apply, but if you were of the view that the harm to the high-wheeled national landscape was such that that was a strong reason for refusal, then you could disapply the tilted balance. It's a little bit technical, but we're basically saying we're not saying there's no harm to the AONB, and James was really clear about that. And you have to give that great weight. We think that it's localised and it's offset by the benefits. That's a judgment that you have to come to.
Councillor McLaren.
Thank you, Chair. So I think everybody's clear on my feelings about the drainage associated with this. At the same time, I do want to say that I take very seriously the comments from officers about the weakness of our case if this came to appeal. And we are very careful stewards of our residents' council tax, and going into a situation with a high risk of losing on appeal is something that I do take seriously. And so I'm not myself ready with a rewording of condition 3, but is there a way that we can make our specific concerns about this known to the Environment Agency? And, you know, maybe that's outside of our remit, and forgive my misunderstanding of our remit if I have done so, but what can we, what can we do to just really make a clarion call from this authority concerning this situation with Southern Water? And, I'm thinking about the new residents as well as the existing residents. They deserve a home in a good environment where they're not worrying about the, sewage, overspill and all that brings with it in terms of health concerns, etc. So I'm just, I suppose, I don't know if it's a question or a comment, but I'm not ready to reword that myself, but I would like to know what is the full extent of what we can do to make our views known.
Thank you, Councillor. Under the questioning section, we made reference to condition 3 and 5, 3 being the foul water condition, which is a strong one in that it requires full details prior to any development commencing. However, we have said that you could add, in consultation with Southern Water, the EA and the Parish Council, as at the moment, the reason is fairly standard. So I'll read it out. This condition is required to ensure the satisfactory drainage of the site, including to avoid flood risk and to prevent water pollution. I would suggest you could add to the reasoning to make it clear to Southern Water and the EA why this condition is imposed, why they're being consulted. So you could say, to prevent water pollution, having particular regard to the sensitive drainage situation within the village of Peasmarsh and concerns over discharge of raw sewage to the River Rother. Full stop. Or continue on
Thank
this
you.
policy.
Thank you. 5, I think, is about surface water, isn't it?
5 is surface
Doesn't it involve
water.
the EA? Because I was just very struck by the parish council's comment about even at the top of the hill, when you dig a grave, it fills with water.
Yeah.
That seems to be a problem of living in Peasmarsh, and I love that fact that it's called Peasmarsh for a reason. But presumably the EA don't involve themselves in the surface water problems, or just below the surface water problem.
No, not for that. But we are. I mean, it would be in consultation with the lead local flood authority and Southern Water. They are the technical experts. Lead county, lead local flood authority have drainage engineers. They're very hot on these matters. They look at everything very thoroughly. You will see their consultation responses. We often go back and forth during applications and in discharge of condition applications because they want more information, further clarification. They're very thorough.
I would like, and I'll get a nudge if I'm wrong or not, I'd like, before we can go any further down here, I think we have to fundamentally start with, do we consider this as a major development in the High Weald or not? Because that then controls the future discussions. So I'd like, and it does lie in the decision maker, and obviously without coming to committee, it would have been the officers, and they've said it's not. The AOMB unit says it is, And we're now the decision makers, so we have to decide whether it is or not. And I don't know if, I know I have an understanding, but I don't know if I want them again to, one of the officers to explain to us again the 190, 191 and footnote 67 and what we have to take into account. I know it's not numbers, it's a different kind of major development, it's what's specific to this site on scale and all the rest of it. But Matt, you've got your finger poised, so I'm going to let you go.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to try and find the wording to bring up on the screen. Whilst I do, can I refer members to page 26 and 27 of the report, specifically paragraph 7.4.4, which goes over the 2 pages. That sets out footnote 67 in the MPPF. I will let you read that. I'm not going to read it to you. Unless you want me to.
So just whilst Matt is finding that, effectively, and he'll show you what the wording says, but it is for the decision making we discussed. It's any development by reason of its scale, character, or nature, which has the potential to have a serious adverse impact on the natural beauty of, the area of outstanding natural beauty, national landscape, whatever you cause there. So any development by reason of its scale, character, or nature, which has the potential to have a serious adverse impact on natural beauty. So it's not any impact, it's a serious or significant adverse impact on natural beauty. As I said, from an officer perspective, and this is what you're going to debate, we don't feel that it meets that test, given the context of rounding off the settlement edge being viewed within the context of an existing settlement. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike, do you mind?
Yeah. Matt and then Councillor Brown.
Thank you. It was my mistake. I thought we had a slide with the wording of Paris 190, 191 and the footnote, but we don't. So thank you, Mike, for reading it out. The footnote, it does say, it says take account of the nature, scale and setting. So in terms of nature, you need to think, right, what are we looking at here? In terms of the development, well, it's a housing site on the edge of a village. Scale, you look at the size, number of houses, number of houses, the overall size of the site compared to the settlement, and then you look at what's around the site as well. There is further consideration or guidance on assessing potential significant adverse impacts in paragraph 746 of the report. So that, it talks about size of the settlement, the location of it in relation to the settlement, compatibility of the proposed land use, so talking residential open space and open space to the south here, intervisibility with the wider High Weald. We stood on site on Tuesday and walked around the edge as well, so should have had got quite a good appreciation for that. And then the 5th bullet point talks about the impact on the High Weald landscape. Thank you.
Councillor Mayor.
Yes. No, in paragraph 7.4.6 on page 27, you've listed a need of in assessing potential significant adverse impacts on the national landscape, consideration needs to be given to the proposal in terms of scale of the development, site location and so on. They're all, I'd say, very plausible things which I might have thought up myself. But is there any specific authority for that? Are there court cases which have raised these matters or guidance?
So in terms of these bullet points, these were provided by sort of the planning policy team, and it's my understanding that there have been sort of legal discussions, so it's sort of based upon court cases, and these were the sort of key issues that were considered as part of that test.
Councillor Graham.
I've sort of arrived at a similar conversation in my own head. Yes, the voices. But from a slightly different direction, which is that of the boundary, the development boundary, which it sort of leapt out at me at the report, and by the way, very, very well and thorough report because it's balancing lots of different issues. But what seems to me is that the development boundary, which is being questioned because of the date of the plan, even though it is a current plan, I think the importance of this land and not developing on it increases because to the south of it we have another development that's just been approved. And then to the north of it, I hope it's north and south, I'm doing the right way, but to the other side is the Pippins development. And I think that puts greater emphasis on that land as being outside of the development boundary. I thought it increases the weight of it being outside of the development boundary because it is more scarce as an open piece of land. The other there's a sort of a secondary observation on the back of that is that the green space that has been allotted is to the lower part of the development, but that is separated from easy access to the public. So what was a large public strip, quite easily accessible through the caravan park, is now a isolated piece, more or less. And I know there's a pathway going through, but if I go for a walk on Sunday in the countryside, I don't want to walk through 70 houses. So it sort of removes that. So I know we're discussing this in terms of major development or not, but I'm sort of arriving to the point that it could be seen as major because of its impact on the remaining piece of HNWL land in and amongst the rest of the settlements.
I mean, that's relevant in the discussion of whether or not it's a major development because you're discussing the significance of the impact. So, yeah, it's relevant to this discussion. I mean, my view, for what it's worth, no, I won't give my view because I'm annoyed sometimes that people think, oh, the chairman said, and I haven't got any special. So, accepting I haven't got any special knowledge, any special insight, to my mind, having seen the site, even though it's 70 houses, it has a minimal impact on the 8 High Weald National Landscape because of potentially Pippins and Jempsons and that lot along there, that I don't think it meets the level of a major development in the countryside, which is strange because I know in our response to the government on delegation, we've said what even 3 or 4 houses in the High Weald could be a major development, but it's all about context. And so to me, in this context, I don't personally feel this actually meets the threshold of a major development in the High Weald National Asset. That's my 2 pennyworth as member of the committee, not as chair of the committee. And it's there to prompt other people like Councillor Barnes giving their view. Councillor Barnes.
Thank you. I would have liked this application more if it had stuck to its original numbers. We know that the parish council is not averse to the idea of this site being used. The neighbourhood plan was sort of saying, yes, it could be a potential site. What really bugs me about it is that it's the massing of it. And I think if we could have actually gone back to the developer and said, let's just go back to your original plan. I mean, it was our officers who persuaded them to double it. and also consider the remark that I think was made by the parish council, that the actual numbers, 70, brings up the population of Peasmarsh by another 12%. And to me, I think it's actually what we're doing to the community. The community is going to have more problems on a busy road. It is going to have problems, as we've identified, with schools and hospitals and doctor surgeries and all the rest of that. We are not helping the community. And if we were to go back to accept that this is a site which is perfectly acceptable for building, but not to the number that we're looking at, that is my overwhelming objection to it. I mean, I really don't think that those people moving into those houses are going to enjoy it. The gardens are tiny. I mean, who wants to live in the countryside and buy a house or even rent a house in which you could do no more than just stick a barbecue? I don't think it's fair. And I think there's going to be horrible problems with the access. The access is 5 metres wide, is it? It says that they're going to try and stop parking along the access road. Well, good luck to them, because a white van driver will find anywhere he can to park a vehicle. I don't think we should do any more at the moment than throw this out and tell them to come back with the original plan, which seems to me to have some degree of sense about it. I don't think there's any sense at all about this. I think it's horrible. Right, thank you. That's my 2 pennyworth.
Thank you. Your last point stopped me from having to say the usual thing that we have to decide on what's in front of us. But you covered that by saying we should reject this and go for something else. Councillor Graham.
Yeah, I'm very sympathetic to that, actually. I think I'd be a lot more conflicted if there were lesser numbers, even though the principles of development boundary, impact on HNWL still stand. But the thing also to remember is the housing numbers, because we have to hit these targets which are nationally set, and we know they're unreasonable, because our planning team have been working like crazy for the last 6 to 9 months, and they've only managed to scrape together like 450 possible houses out of a target of 900. We therefore know that these targets are unreasonable and make no sense. And it's also, this is applied to the whole district, these targets. So why does it have to, that doesn't necessarily mean it's appropriate for Peasmarsh. A secondary point from that is that the development next to Jempson's will free up a lot of other housing as retired people move, sell up their homes who are local, and that will create more supply. So that supply is already being met, I think, even though it seems weird to sort of allocate so much to a small village. But I think that's already being met by currently approved applications.
Councillor Mear, then Councillor Barnes. Thank you.
I have great difficulty in seeing this as anything other than a major development. It's 70, which is a lot in itself. I know if you go to North East Bexhill, we're talking in the hundreds. But certainly in the context of a rural village, 70 is a lot. I think it's 11.6% addition to the size of the village in terms of numbers of houses and people, of course. The other thing is that in terms of the context, the site itself is national landscape, so there is inevitable harm to the national landscape by virtue of the fact of building on it. And that seems to be completely inescapable. I'll be corrected by officers and lawyers. I think there have been cases where as few as 40 houses have been held to be major development. And we're nearly double that. And we are also charged with conserving and enhancing the national landscape, which is very hard to see how that can be done by what is, to all intents and purposes, a suburban estate.
With a pond.
And I know that there are 2 points here which interlink. there is the question of whether it's a major development, bearing in mind its context and the effect on the national landscape. But there's also the question of the design itself. We have comments from Diane Russell, who's the Planning and Design Advisor of the High Weald AONB unit. There is 7 pages of absolutely excoriating criticism of the design and of the housing. This isn't, oh, they would say that, wouldn't they, sort of response. It's very closely reasoned. It's based on a very detailed design guide, which we have adopted ourselves as a material consideration. And I think, I feel I have to take that very seriously indeed. Now, I know that we may have the irresistible force meeting the immovable object, in that if we are to achieve housing numbers, we have to build houses, and to get developers to build houses, we have to get them to build the houses that people want to live in. And that might not be what really fits in with the national landscape. But the fact is that the government has provided that we protect and enhance the national landscape. And if we're not doing that, then we're failing in our duty. So I have great difficulty in giving support to this application. Very great difficulty. It may be that the rules are out of date. It may be that the boundary of the national landscape needs to be adjusted. I don't know if there's a mechanism for that. But I think as things stand, this to me is a major development which is harmful to the national landscape and a design which is open to very detailed and pertinent criticism.
Councillor McLaren.
Yeah, I absolutely, hear what you're saying. I think, I'm mindful that as a district we're 83% national landscape, and I'd just like to reflect on the fact that compared with a very large percentage of our national landscape, this one does look to me as if it is somewhat sandwiched in between Jempson's, the caravan park, and other housing. So I'm just reflecting to myself, compared with, imagining we had 100 of these, because of the extensiveness of our High Weald national landscape. This to me isn't going to be the most extreme example of harm, what's the word, damage, harm, impact. I don't think it's, going to be the most extreme example that we're asked to consider.
Of course, I'm left thinking where to go now. Because I would just echo Councillor McLaren's part that, and actually Councillor Mears' part, that even if this was 30 houses, as you would wish, that would still be causing harm to the High Weald national landscape. But whether it's the 30 that you would wish or the 70 that is here, I sort of go with Councillor McLaren there, that it's not a significant impact because of its location, and therefore I still say I don't think it's a major development, which doesn't mean to say that once we've got over that question and we get into whether or not we approve it, that I automatically say I'm going to approve it. But I'm not sure. I'm going to pause for like 10 seconds while I listen to the solicitor and the head of planning to see if we need to clearly decide one way or the other on the question of major development as a separate issue and then go on to discuss the application. So bear with me while I have that discussion. I must admit, I should have warned Paula this morning that my left ear is blocked and I can't hear a word she's saying. But it can be quite helpful. Right. That discussion was basically to put the onus back on to members that I'm going to say, in the absence of a motion saying that it is a major development in the national landscape, we go with the officer's decision that it is not a major development in the national landscape. Councillor Creaser.
I know that we have to, I'm aware that we are supposed to consider each development separately and on its own merit. When you have a village that's got quite a few different developments going on, and the potential increase in the properties and also spilling out into the we're not actually looking at, as town planners like that, we're looking at little bits. Now, if you put all the things that are going on in Peasmarsh together, I mean, since I've lived in the area, Peasmarsh has grown exponentially, and this will really kick it up to another level. Is there any consideration for a village that's surrounded by high-wheeled national landscape, etc., has, although it is a landlocked area, name suggesting Peasmarsh, it's a marsh, I'm finding it a little difficult to work out, because I think we're really pushing the boundaries on this. The other thing, of course, is the vernacular is this is a village. You know, if we start putting properties that you would have in the middle of a town, all squished together, that takes it out of context. I'm getting a bit confused with all of this. So the concern I have is looking at the overall thing. Will we be the authors of our own downfall? I understand, and I absolutely 100% respect everything you guys do. And if you weren't here, we'd be in big trouble. But how do we square that with the balance of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different developments, sites, then spilling over to the countryside, and then saying, well, you know, that's that one. Yeah, we have to set that separate. This is a village. I'm really struggling to work out how that's going to happen, because if you put 70 homes in one site in a lot of villages, they will change their complete situation, and they will be spilling over to the countryside. The other thing is, if we start this little drip kind of thing, what's going to prevent the government saying to us, well, you've got to use all the areas of outstanding natural beauty, Ramsars, whatever, triple SIs. Where does it stop? I'm really struggling with that.
I think, and I'll come to the officers, and I have seen you, Councillor Osborne, I will come to you. Separate to the major development question, when we come to decide the application, the cumulative and the urbanisation of the village is something to be considered, isn't it, in our decision?
Okay, so I'm not completely
No,
out.
you're not completely up a paddle.
I feel
now.
a bit better now.
Completely out of paddle. Were you going to come in before I go to Councillor Osborne?
Yeah, that's entirely correct, Chair. I was just going to say, for the purposes of the major in the MPPF, so what Councillor Drayson's entirely correct. It's about, you know, the potential to have a serious adverse impact on the natural beauty. So that's what we're talking about the major impact on it. The only other thing I would say is, do look at, you know, I realise the concern in respect of, you know, GPs and all that sort of thing, but do look at what we've done when we've tested that recently in Westfield, for example. The inspector had no truck with it, to be honest, because of the urgent and pressing need for housing. And, you know, let's be honest, if you haven't got a house or you're in temporary accommodation, then it's also difficult to access those services. Thank you, Chair.
I'm going to bring in Councillor Osborne. I know he's not a member of the committee, but as the ward councillor, and he did contribute earlier, and I have the power. Councillor Osborne.
Thank you very much for wielding your power, Chairman. No, I was just going to say, I hope it may be helpful. The picture that I was looking at has now disappeared from the screen, but the area, when we did the site visit on Tuesday, the area known as the old football pitch, which is the piece behind the caravan park and close to Jimson's. That was never part, in the 12 years that I've been a ward member covering Peasmarsh, and before that it was Councillor Ganley. That was always sort of not sort of in any development plan or any bit, as far as I can remember. So that obviously a deal has been done to acquire that site. I think it was in separate ownership. I'm not 100% sure, but that was never sort of a site to be included, as I seem to remember in years gone by. So that's possibly why, some members have mentioned why so many. Well, there's a fair chunk of additional land there that's obviously being used. So I just thought that might be useful to members to know. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Osborne. And for those watching, that the picture's up again now. It's that double row of houses to the left, behind the trees there. That's the old football pitch that Councillor Osborne was referring to. Any other? Councillor Mear.
I move that we consider this to be a major development.
Is that seconded by anyone? Does anyone want to speak on that? Councillor Mear.
Just to reiterate what I said earlier, if I were a complete non-planner, I know I'm not a qualified planner, but if I knew nothing about planning at all and this scheme were presented to me, I would probably say it's a good idea. I'd be happy with it. But we have to approach it with the knowledge of the planning policies and laws. And to me, this is a significant development. It is in itself harmful to the national landscape. And we combine that with the scathing criticisms in the response from the High Weald to the design aspects of it, which they find to be highly harmful. And for all those reasons, 70 houses, we have to be very careful that we conserve and enhance the national landscape. And if we do not see this as a major development, there will be implications throughout the villages. We will be making a real rod for our own backs because the rules need to be applied. If the rules need to be changed, then let the government change them. I might even support that. But I cannot see this as anything other than a major development.
Thank you. Councillor Groningen, do you want to speak as the second or not?
I echo that.
Thank you. Bear with. Okie doke. So, does anyone else want to comment on this before I put it to the vote? No, right. The motion is that that we consider that this is a major development within the High Weald national landscape. All those in favour, please show clearly. Sorry, was your hand up? No, right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5, 4. Those against? 3 abstentions? No. Right, that is carried, so we consider this to be a major development in the High Weald national landscape. Stand by while we discuss where we're going next. Right, Matt Wills is going to put up on the screen we now have to, try to think what it's called, exceptional circumstances test, the major development test, that now we've decided it. There's a different bar to reach with regard to the, I'm hoping you can zoom in, otherwise we might be a bit stuck. And risk it one more time. So that's paragraph 190 of the MPPF. It's funny, it's centred on Matt's screen, but not on the one up there.
I've got stuff in the way that you can't see. And then across.
Right.
There you go.
That'll do. Who's going to talk us through this? You, Matt? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, motion's carried. You consider this major development. The MPPF, paragraph 190, says here that major development should be refused other than in exceptional circumstances and where it can be demonstrated that the development is in the public interest. Your assessment needs to take into consideration A, B and C. So A is the need for the development. So we're talking about housing need here, as the proposal is housing. It's set out in great detail in the officer's report about housing land supply issue. We're nowhere near meeting our target. So please bear that in mind. B, cost of and scope of developing outside the designated area. I think the discussions earlier referenced the 83% high wheel designation across the district. We are going to have to build houses in the high wheels in appropriate locations. So it doesn't mean that, you know, housing need we have to build everywhere. No, we have to be very careful, and that's. But as per the officer's report, we've explained why we think this is appropriate. It was identified in the neighbourhood plan as suitable potentially suitable longer term. It is surrounded on three sides by development, as explained in the report. So again, bear that in mind in your deliberations. C says any detrimental effect on the environment, the landscape and recreational opportunities, and the extent to which that could be moderated. So you do need to assess what impact this specific development has. We all know it's greenfield, undeveloped, but you do need to think about context here. The village, yes, it's had an approval next door, but this specific site is surrounded on three sides. You've got the supermarket site to the west, you've got the pub and caravan park to the north, and to the northeast, existing ribbon development along the road, to the east, the Pippin site, which is approved for housing development. So, again, when you're thinking about the impact, you've got to think about the scale of the harm here, and also in terms of paragraph 11D1, which references strong reasons for refusal. So, would this be a strong reason? I think that's all I have. But yeah, feel free to ask questions to officers.
Yeah, I should apologise for you, Matt, for not giving you time to think about that. I dropped you straight in it. So going to Councillor Barnes, while perhaps James or Mike are thinking of other things. Councillor Barnes.
But this is an interesting situation because I think we should throw this one back to the developers and say, let's go back to the original plan, in which case it would not be possibly a full-blown application. But what I'm looking at is we can actually quantify that by C, any detrimental effects on the environment, the landscape and recreation. Well, it's all of that. It's actually the houses could look better, could possibly better design. People could have gardens, people could move around within the site so that they could actually be part of a housing development which had some balance. My huge objection to what we're looking at the moment is that it's just literally block upon block upon block of houses. It's wrong in that particular context. So I would say if there's a way of taking it back to the developer, say we haven't refused it as a development because that is with the blessing of the neighbourhood plan, with the parish council, and presumably all those who would breathe a sigh of relief because it would mean that it would be easier to get in and out of the site. It only has one entrance and exit. Then I would have thought we were possibly being quite moderate.
Thank you. Any other comments? So I thought you were just playing with your pen, Councillor Growler. Councillor Mear.
Well, I really hardly better say because we keep saying the same thing. We can only decide on the one in front of us. I'm not going to commit myself to saying that some other scheme might be acceptable, notwithstanding paragraph 190. I can't commit myself to saying that, but you know there is that option to be explored.
Yeah. Mike, please.
I think I'm listening to the debate, and it just sort of shows the difficult job that planning committees up and down the country have got to do, and how seriously you're obviously taking this. Just as I understand it, the scheme as it was originally proposed was 45 dwellings, but they were much larger bedroom units, and of course we've already talked about dwelling mix and what people need. Generally, the need is not necessarily for 4 and 5 bedroom dwellings, so that is an important consideration. I think that deferral has been mentioned, and I think that is a potential, but I think from the applicant and the parishes, and you know, it needs to be sort of fairly clear that what you want us to look at with the applicant and whether they want to do that or not. You know, everybody needs some certainty. You know, you're concerned about ABC. You know, that I think if we could have that would be preferable, in my view, to a refusal. And I say that because I actually think our chances on appeal are potentially quite low. You can disregard my view, of course, but it is my role to advise you on that. And I say that for some of the reasons Matt said. You know, we have got much higher housing targets now than we had. We haven't got a 5-year housing land supply. We haven't had it for many years. The neighbourhood plan runs until 2028. We've got, and you know, Matt's just sort of pointed out to me, you know, the 190 is exceptional circumstances. Sorry, Matt, when I'm talking, I struggle to, I can only do one thing at once, apologies. The neighbourhood plan runs until 2028. it does identify it as possibly suitable longer term for development. The examiner comments, which James referred to, are in there. Officers have talked about it rounding off the settlement edge relatively well, especially when you, Matt's point in relation to the adjacent nearly approved development and the supermarket. Officers have put it forward in the local plan. That has limited weight, I will say that, but there is a direction of travel, and there have been many, many other sites in Peasmarsh that have been discounted. The vast majority of sites have been discounted for development. You've got the retention of the field boundaries, mature trees and hedgerows, and you've got a fairly significant area of open space to the south. Against that, and Councillor Mear talked about it, there is localised harm to which you give great weight, but we as officers still think that the benefits outweigh the disbenefits. Actually, I'm going to hand, Matt is trying to say something to me and I can't take it. But what I will say is there are two reasonable views here. You could come down on the side of the landscape, you can come down on the side of the housing. I think that there is, I think that there are exceptional circumstances, in my view, to justify this here. If you can be very clear to us what you want us to look at with the applicant, we can talk to them. But they do need to be very clear what you want, and we need to be very clear what you want us to look at. So thank you, Chair.
Matt.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mike. It was along the lines of what I was going to say, so I will keep this very short in that officers' advice is, notwithstanding that we didn't consider this major in terms of Para 190, we acknowledge you do. However, we as officers believe you can argue exceptional circumstances here on each of the points A, B and C that we spoke through. So that is our advice to you.
So just to put some bones on that, Matt. So with the need for the development, you're talking in there with the housing numbers, the housing target, and the impact of refusing other local, well, I'm not so sure about that one. The cost and scope for developing outside, I think you described that as limited, or you were limited because of the amount of national landscape. And then the detrimental effect on the environment, you're harping back to the original reasons why James didn't think it was a major development, because of it's a limited impact and where it is. And is that right? I'm just buying everyone thinking time, really.
Correct. Yeah, those arguments are relevant here.
And I know there was a question mentioned on appeals, or the appeals were discussed, I think, within terms of deciding whether or not it's a major development. We've done that. Do we have any sort of up-to-date knowledge on whether or not housing need would be lost on appeal, would win the appeal, would lose it? I'm just thinking everyone in the country's got a housing shortage, I imagine, except some very big places, and therefore a housing need is not necessarily exceptional. It's run-of-the-mill for every council. So I just want to check, do we know of any appeals that are likely to affect us saying yay or nay based on it being a major development?
It's important to say this is a really high policy test. I agree with Matt's comments, but there are many occasions where appeal inspectors have said that housing need is an exceptional circumstance. There are other circumstances where they may take the view that the disbenefits are still too high, but it's certainly not the case that we can't say that. I would encourage you. It's very difficult for us to say that the housing isn't an exceptional circumstance here, given our need and the fact that we're nowhere close to meeting it, and we haven't been for years. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Mear.
An observation that it's not the failure of Rother officers or this committee to grant permissions that's the problem. The problem is the houses aren't getting built. And it's several years since we dealt with the Pippins application, which was meant to be ready to go, and we turn up on Tuesday and nothing's happened. And that's common experience across the district. Coming to the merits of this, it's the application itself. We have to look at any detrimental effect on the environment, the landscape and recreational opportunities, and the extent to which that could be moderated. Well, I think it may well be that the harm could be moderated by an improved design. But we can't deal with that here other than by refusing the present application.
No. We can't.
Councillor Barnes.
Could we go for deferral and have the officers speak to the applicant, pointing out that recently inspectors have been coming back more and more with reasons for refusing applications on the basis of the care of the AONB, but also in that conversation with the developer, saying that since the High Weald unit had really cogent reasons, and all of those are thoroughly accepted by us, that we would be looking for a development. We would not turn down the idea of development. I think that's very important to say that, because I don't think we want anything to go near appeal. What we do want to do is a proper reasoned conversation about the fact that we need to have houses which are better designed in a more spacious setting as appropriate for Peasmarsh, taking into account all those things which we've talked about, drainage and sewage and all the rest of it, and pointing out that that is a particular concern of the committee, but also saying, come back with a fresh idea for something that the parish council is going to like, the neighbourhood plan is going to approve of, and that everybody's going to be happy with. Because I think if we don't do all that, we're actually not doing our duty.
Before I come to Michael, I'd also add on there Councillor Mear's point about the High Weald design guide is also in there. I just said to Mike, it's definitely one for him, not for me. So, one moment. I want to hear from Mike. He's still coming up with an answer.
You want me to?
Yes, please, and then I'll come to Councillor McLaren.
So I think in terms of deferral, and I think the point was well put. Obviously, we would need to speak to the applicant outside this venue. They can't speak here. I think we would need to be very clear what you as a committee are saying to us, and effectively, what I'm hearing is that you are concerned. I mean, one thing I will say is it's not within our gift as officers to get any development that everyone agrees to. That's generally not possible, although we try for it, obviously. I think we would need to be very clear that what you're saying to us, I think, and I don't know if this is just you at the moment, Councillor Mrs Barnes, or the whole committee, is that, you want the design of this scheme looked at, in particularly in relation to the High Wealds comments. But I think by saying that, you are effectively saying that you are accepting the principle of those fields being lost to development. And I think that's, we need to, whether that's the sort of committee's will, I think it's only fair on the applicant through this process that they can't obviously, it would be quite tough to get the design improved, and then we kick it out on the principle. So, I did hear some murmurings on this side of things. So we just need to be very clear what we're asking them to do. And for the purposes of the parish and everyone else that might be watching this as well.
Councillor Groner.
We've run through many concerns, but the number one for me would be urbanisation in the HNWL. And so I don't know if it is possible, if it's binary, because building any houses there contributes towards that urbanisation. But perhaps it isn't binary and there's a matter of degree, but that's unknowable until you see a new application with a new design and how it addresses that common.
I was going back.
So it's very hard to commit.
Question to you on that of when you say urbanisation, are you talking more density, like the numbers we're talking about?
Yeah, I think it's the removal of common space down into a less accessible area and a great reduction in the overall size. And then I do understand, like James explained to us on site, that these are carports, so it does give a slightly different thing, but still reading the wheeled units comments on there, it's something they're highly concerned about. And I do think, because it's the HNWL, we have to give that some considerable weight. The parish I also give great weight to as well. These are the guys who live there and they know their area, and they've supported 2 other applications that went through. So, it's not for lack of building houses there. It's not for lack of Peasmarsh, shouldering its fair share burden, as it were, of what is a district target.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. I've got Councillor McLaren and Councillor Gray, I think.
Thank you, Chair. So I've got 3 things to say, and rather than I want to get them all out there in one go, if that's all right. So I want to check, I think I heard this, but I want to check with officers the fact that we as the decision-making body have decided that this is a major development. Does that, in their view, change the risk of us losing on appeal? So that's my question that I'm putting out there. Secondly, just because it's easy if you don't say anything counter to what's been said, it looks like you agree with it. I'm not certain that all people needing homes want a larger garden, especially if they're in the context of an area where there's lots of opportunity for walks and recreation all around, and it can be an additional burden for families or people, single parents or whatever, to try and manage a larger garden. So I just wanted to say that. And then the third thing is, before we get to voting on what's been put here, I'd just like to make sure that we have properly logged the rework of condition 3 as per Matt's earlier discussion about the Environment Agency and so on. So I'll leave my question 1 out there, but that's my lot. Thank you.
Do you want to do it? Okay.
Thank you, Councillor. So, in terms of chances at appeal, given the motion was carried that you consider it is major, if, looking ahead now as well, if it was, if you vote on a refusal, it would give the council extra things to argue in the event of appeal. However, I would caveat that by my advice earlier saying it's officers' belief that exceptional circumstances do apply here. But you'd have to bring out what why they don't apply here in any subsequent votes, if you follow me.
My question was just really whether, as the decision-making body, having made that decision, it, in your view, changes the risk level of losing an appeal?
Not significantly, no. No, it has, doesn't have much of an impact in my view. That's what my advice would be. Do you want me to comment on the others? Or? Yeah, 2 garden size, I think that was just a comment, wasn't it? Yeah, and 3 condition. I think keep that in mind in terms of any future motions and votes, and that could be clarified at that stage.
Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor McLaren's probably
I already asked this question, but my main concern, apart from everything else that everyone else has said, is the sewage and the pollution to the environment and the river. So if that can be covered, if we do defer this, to come back, you know, with greater clarity on that, that would be very reassuring.
Could we whispering time again, please? Councillor Creaser.
May I ask a question, please?
Yes, of course.
We've been going at this for 2.5 hours and we haven't had a break. And is it possible to have a break quite soon, please?
I've got a feeling we might be coming to an end. I don't know, but I'm going to come back to Councillor Barnes. She was saying something earlier. Yeah, but you were talking about moving something.
I should like to move deferral. Would you like me to add the bits and pieces?
Yes, please.
Taking into account the comments, the report from the High Wheels unit. Also, number 3 on the conditions should be
Sewage.
Sewage and all that sort of thing. Well, I mean, you can put it all together, but I want this area to be protected, and that's it really. A deferral so that we can have a proper discussion with the applicant.
And you were covering it before I come for a second for that, so that was covering the design of the buildings themselves. Would it include the density which Councillor Groner referred to? Would it also cover the density that Councillor Groner referred, the numbers of houses? I'm just trying to give the developer a definite, this
Well,
is what
my
we're
original
thinking.
thought was it was the developer himself who came up with the number, and it was the council who, you know, in their wisdom and in obedience with the government and all that sort of thing, radically increased the number. So could we go back to the original number as applied for?
Probably not, because that would be down, I think, the refusal
If it was
route,
even
but the
fewer,
deferring
it would
route
be
is
fine.
still to talk about
Yes.
the design, the density and the sewage.
The most important thing is the design, the layout, the sewage and the water.
Councillor, you were seconding it. Councillor Groner.
Sorry, I just wanted to point out that the sewage, though, the main principal concern is the conduct of Southern Water, not whether it gets connected to the thing. This is how it's always blurred a little bit.
Well,
because the whole thing is, oh, you will have to connect it. Well, yeah, we know that. It's what happens to it as the impact of connecting that much additional households.
But behind the simple word sewage is that, because we were already saying for condition 3, if we were going to go there, that we need to talk to Southern Water. and ask the Environment Agency. They might not respond, but we should at least ask them. And that's part of the deferral, because we want what comes back to have addressed the sewage question in more detail, the design to be improved, arguably, or different, and possibly the density. But part of when it comes back, it's got to have had work done on those. So it's down to is it down to talk to the EA, the developer, or us? It's us.
Well, both.
So it's both. So that's part and parcel of. So I accept that Councillor Barnes has said one word, but there's a whole lot behind that one word. You were going to say something?
I'm just wondering, so there's two parties to this, the applicant and the authority. Should we adjourn briefly to find out what the applicant's point of view would be? Because we're talking about deferral or refusal, which to the committee means more or less the same.
1 month. No, but so yeah, I'm just wondering if I should go to the vote. Right, so Mike's just going to explain what's behind before I go to a vote.
Yeah, and I think as Chair sort of said, we do need to wrap this up. I think what I would suggest to you members is, rather than doing that, I think that what I'm hearing is that you want to defer whilst we speak to the applicant and other bodies in respect of design in particular, density and sewage. What I would also add to that, and it's for you to do the motions, I would also suggest, we don't know the applicant's view on that, that if they're not prepared to work with us on that, that you delegate a refusal to officers in consultation with the chair of planning committee for reasons in respect of landscape impact and design. That's what I would suggest the motion is. Then one or two things will happen. It'll either come back to this committee and we'll hopefully have addressed the three issues you've raised, or the applicant won't want to talk to us and sort of advance those things, in which case it will be refused for delegated powers. That's what I would suggest the motion should say, if that's okay, given the balance of debate.
So, I know, but suitably better enhanced. Does anyone, it's been seconded by Councillor Gray, does anyone want to speak? Bearing in mind Councillor Groner already has, and we're only allowed to speak once after the motion's been moved. Does anyone want to speak on the motion? In that case, I'll go to the vote. So all those in favour of deferring the application in lines with what Mike Hughes just said, and we will pick that up in the recording, but it's based on density, design and sewage, with the delegation if the applicants don't want to engage with that, the officers in consultation with me can refuse it, and then it will come back possibly as a new application, or if they do go with the deferral, it will come back as an alteration, if that makes sense. I think it did. So all those in favour, please show. That is unanimous. That is deferred along the lines of what was just said and the motion. We will now, sorry,
I've just been waiting to add, Councillor Cook asked me to pass on her apologies that she had to leave at 11:20.
Okay. We will now have a 15-minute break, because I don't think the next one's going to take very long, but we will have a little break. Thank you. In the members' room, there'll be... Oh, thank you, and welcome back. Thank you, Councillor Gadley. You can still hear and see us? Yeah. Nod your head, that'll do. Earth calling. No, okay. Right. We now move on to agenda item 8, which is application RR 2026/0349/4. And this is 12 Beeching Road, Bexley-on-Sea, TN 393LG. The proposal is for the erection of a single-storey front extension, relocation of gates and car parking spaces, and introduction of soft landscaping to the Beeching Road frontage. And it's recommended that it be resolved to grant full planning permission. The case officer is Katie Edwards, but it's going to be presented by Matt Worsley. And the reason is the site is owned by Rother District Council. It's not subject to speaking scheme, so we'll go straight to Matt's presentation and then questions. I am the ward councillor. I'm one of the ward councillors. I don't intend speaking on it. Matt, if you please.
Thank you, Chair. The site is located within the town of Bexhill along Beeching Road, which is a recognised industrial area with many business premises, many warehouse-style buildings. The site is on the northwest side of Beeching Road. It actually used to be occupied by Rother District Council. It was used as offices many years ago. Yeah, I'm thinking a few years, but it's probably more than just a few. Anyway, it's still council owned, hence why it's here before you. It's occupied by a business called Furnace Controls. They are looking to extend the building to provide additional space, and it's the building to the north at the front that they're proposing to extend, flat roof extension to the front, which will result in rearranged parking areas and landscaping, which I have plans to show you. In front of you is the aerial photography. You will see the building to the north. So we're looking at the two buildings in the middle, just above Beeching Close, CL. And it's the second building that would be extended. For you are some photographs. So the top left photograph shows the existing two-storey building to the left. The building to be extended is to the right in the background, set back. The bottom left photo shows a closer image of the building to be extended. The existing layout is shown on the screen before you, so slightly different orientation on the plan. So the building to the north is the one proposed to be extended. And this is the existing elevation. So you've got the two-storey flat roof building on the left, the single-storey shallow pitched mono on the right. Before you is the proposed layout, which shows a rectangle to the front of the building to the north. It also shows a revised parking layout, which would result in the loss of one space. For you, the proposed elevation, well, front elevation to be specific, so the building on the left remains the same. Building on the right, you have the flat roof single storey extension. The height of it would match the ridge of the existing building. You'll be able to see that on the next slide on the side elevation. So yeah, at the right-hand side of the screen, that's the proposed extension, flat roof, height in line with the ridge of the existing building. As explained in the report, officers consider this proposal supports a well-established local business, helps it grow. The design, scale and design is appropriate for the area and the building. Parking revisions are also acceptable, considering there's a car park next door, as well as the location near to the town centre, bus, train, walking, cycling, etc. For all those reasons, the recommendation is to approve. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. I'm just wondering why you weren't on that picture, but I think there's a bit of a technical issue, I think. Thank you. Any questions for the officer, please?
Thank you. I'm not sure whether this is a question appropriately, but I'd like to know, is it going to increase the employment base there? Is there going to be more people?
Do you know that, Matt? Is it going to increase employment?
On the application form, it would say, I haven't got that information to hand, it can only help support the business, even if there isn't an increase in the employment numbers.
Fine. It's just a question. I think it's a good idea anyway. I'm happy to vote for it.
Thank you.
Yeah, from my knowledge, it's quite a sizable employer, and it's a well-respected company. I think it does international and European business on controls and control panels. So the matter's open for discussion. If there's no more questions, Councillor Groner.
Any reasons to object to this?
That's a novel question, isn't it? Phrase that another way and make it more positive.
Are there any reasons against voting for this?
I was thinking more positive would be, I would like to move.
I would like to move that we support the officer's recommendation.
Moved by Councillor Groner, seconded by Councillor Mear. Any debate required, or shall I move straight to the vote? All those in favour of granting planning permission as per the officer's recommendation, please show. That is unanimous. Thank you. That just leaves me with agenda item 9, which is the date and time for the next meeting and the next site inspection. Night site inspections, if there are any, will be Tuesday the 23rd of June, starting from the Town Hall at 9:30. And the next committee meeting will be on Thursday the 25th of June, also at 9:30. Thank you for everyone to their contributions, and to those online. To you, Tony, thank you, and goodbye.